We do have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion.
And I will say this, Commissioners, I'm glad that we got 4, because if it was less than 3, FDOT would reject it, and we have to start all over again on this project.
Yeah, the lab program is becoming more and more, has more and more strings attached to it. As I said earlier, we're the only entity in the county that can receive LAP funds, and it may be one of these things that eventually may become a burden for the county. We'll just see. They're becoming harder and harder to be in compliance with the LAP program.
Okay, that motion was approved. Next will be Mr. Kirk Blair, TDC report.
I'm sure everybody's aware of the audience here, but, so the program that's going on down Island Drive is a state grant, and that's a state project for a bike path. And so we're building this county one on the other side, so the loop around both sides. But the one going down Island Drive, the county has no control over. It's a state project, and it's moving forward at its own speed and its own contractors.
Okay, Mr. Blair.
Good morning, Commissioners. I included in your packet today my report, but I'll highlight some of the things in it. Our numbers, I reported last month that overall 2016-17, our collections maintained a 4% increase over the previous year. For the first month of 2017-18, you'll notice that we were down a little under 10% in October. October has historically been a growing month for us, and this year doesn't reflect that growth, but we're still optimistic that overall we'll make at least last year's numbers or probably even better. Once again, I have to remind you that from month to month the numbers change depending upon how some of the lodging companies report. We also, I'll remind you that Airbnb now is paying to the state, and they pay on a different basis. So 1 month is not necessarily reflective of what the year will be. Our board approved last week renewing our partnership with Visit Florida. We've been working closely with the state's visitor marketing arm over the last few months, and in fact, last week we conducted a joint meeting with Visit Florida staff, their marketing staff, and our local lodging companies to help the lodging companies do more promotion and possibly work on some cooperative marketing arrangements between the TDC and the local lodging companies. Our grants committee will begin meeting this month to conduct a review of the sustaining grant program as you requested. I noticed this morning that when I was looking over my report that the attached schedule was not included, and I'll send that to you later on today. I apologize for that. The TDC board approved 2 requests for assistance last week. One was a joint effort between H. Coley and the Elsie Newell program to bring the boys choir of Tallahassee in town, and that's a nationally recognized singing group from a church in Tallahassee, and we're excited that this is going to be a cooperative effort between Elsie Newell, H. Kohler, and several of the community's churches. The second was to provide funds to help promote the Bring Me a Book organization. We're going to be visited later on this week. We have 2 groups coming in. The first is going to be some travel writers from China, which is a joint project with Visit Florida and Bay County TDC. These writers are going to start with Bay County. They're going to spend a couple days there, and then they'll come over and spend a couple days with us. And then towards the end of the week and over the weekend, we're going to be doing filming with a group out of Tallahassee, does an AM in the morning show on Fox 49 every week. Last week they featured Shelley Shepard and information on the oyster cook-off. This week they're going to be doing filming for our Girls Getaway promotion that's starting this month and will be going for the next couple of months. The legislature is going to be particularly busy this year on TDC issues. At the present, there are 4 bills in, 2 in each house, which I've attached in your packet, have been introduced this year. One is is the massive bill that the Speaker has been promoting for increasing transparency, not just of tourist development councils, but economic development groups and a number of other groups. There have been 2 drafts of this bill now. The one that I sent to you is the latest committee substitute. And I went through it the other day. There are a lot of issues in there that I think are going to be problematic to us. There are some that are going to be time-consuming. The reporting requirements are significant. We have to report after every event. Financials from each of the events. We still have to figure out whether that applies to the small $2,000 grant projects that we got, or just projects that the TDC does. So there's still a long way to go, and believe it or not, in the session, we've got another month and a half. And we're expecting that both bills are going to get tied up in the Senate for a while, and that's where the final compromise is going to be. So we're still looking at them cautiously and hoping that the legislature in their ultimate wisdom comes out with something good. But in general, most of the issues on transparency are things that we've addressed with the TDC last year in increasing our transparency and having board members report on conflicts of interest and those kinds of things. So I don't see anything monumental that's going to impact on what we do. It's more going to be time consuming. And finally, I included a copy of the new sign for the East Point Visitor Center that our board approved last week as well. The next meeting of the TDC will be February 14th. And as I mentioned earlier, we have two committee meetings later on this month. One will be the Grants Committee, and the other will be the committee reviewing the collection of taxes locally and a registration program for lodging companies. Happy to answer any questions.
Only comment I got is reviewing the bills that you're saying are being submitted to the legislature. It will put more pressure on this board as it, we review the contracts and we do all this, but I just want the board to be aware that they're not only looking at the transparency of the TDC, they're also looking to make sure that this board is overseeing properly the TDC. And that's what I took from the bill itself. And there's a lot of stuff in there, as you mentioned. It limits what you can pay for a motel room and on and on and on and on. I think it was about 18 pages, but
Yeah.
What I gathered from it was going to make sure this board had due oversight, which we do, and we always have. But I'm just saying, they're not only looking at the TDCs, they're looking at our board that oversees the TDCs, and I just want to make the board aware of that. Other than that, a lot of things, like as you stated, we already do, but this board will have to be a little more careful and a little more thorough in our review of some of the contracts and different things like that. But we already do that. But I'm just saying, just letting the board, making the board aware of that.
I think
And
you're
that's-
absolutely right, Commissioner. This legislation mostly is directed to those TDCs around the state that were set up as nonprofit organizations and had a great deal of independence, and they didn't report as we do with all the financial disclosure and the reporting requirements that the state has on local governments. These groups have kind of gone on their own. They've hired terribly expensive staff. They've stayed in expensive hotels. They've done a number of things that would never cross muster here. But nonetheless, all TDCs are covered in it, so we're all going to have to respond to it.
And I think a lot of it has to do with them doing some revisions to Visit Florida, and instead of just like picking on Visit Florida, now they've expanded that scope of work into the TDC, so it don't look like they're picking on a state agency. Now they're more or less picking on everybody.
Yeah.
So that's basically what any other comment from the board for Mr. Kirk?
Just one, I saw I was reading some stuff this morning, getting ready to come to the meeting, and I noticed where the House has already, Corcoran, who is the Speaker of the House, sent down his priorities. They've already approved the majority of his priorities and sent it on over to the Senate side. So that means to tell you there's gonna be a fast track in the legislature this year. A fast track. So if you don't have it in there, you are gonna probably lose that out. So, and they're going along with what the Speaker wants, and that's where this is coming from with the Speaker about the TDCs and everything, this is one of his priorities. For sure.
Any other comments from the board members? Anything from Mr. Blair? Thank you, Kurt, for coming in
Thank you very
today.
much. You too.
Sir, before you move forward, I just want to clear the record. The reason Ms. Coulter isn't here from the Sheriff's Department, she has the same flu the Department of Health was just talking about. She's home with the flu and she's at that contagious state, so she emailed me. I got an email yesterday or the day before yesterday. So I'll put her on the 6th, our next meeting.
Okay. Next on the agenda will be Mr. Grayson Shepherd, artificial reef discussion.
Morning, Board. I'm Grayson Shepherd. I'm an offshore charter captain here out of Apalachicola. Been here for 19 years as a charter captain. I guess you guys are kind of aware of some of the disparity that's going on between state fishing regulations and federal fishing regulations, especially concerning grouper and red snapper. The state owns the property basically out to 9 miles. Beyond that is federal waters. To be a charter captain to fish in federal waters, you have to have a very expensive license. Right now, it's $20,000 to have a license to fish out there. So there's a lot of charter captains here in Franklin County that don't have that license, that are limited to only go out 9 miles. In this part of Franklin County, we have between East Pass over by Dog Island and Indian Pass, we have 2 artificial reefs in state waters. One of them is the Franklin Reef, which is the old bridge that went out to St. George Island. They dumped it out in 1988. The other one is called the El Buoy, and it's a pile of concrete culvert pipes that was dumped in 1965 out from West Pass. Those are the only 2 that we have in state waters. Most of the water out here is like a desert on the bottom, so it kind of limits what people can do as far as going out short distance and being able to catch fish. So I looked into it. I went to FWC's Artificial Reef Department and asked them what we have to do to fix this. And there's a whole long list of things, one of them being a permit application. Back in the day, anybody could take chicken coops or an old boat out there and sink it, but those days are gone. That's considered illegal dumping, and there's a $5,000 fine that comes with it if we get caught doing it. So there's no more of that. What we have to do is apply for an application through FWC. There's a whole list of requirements that they want done. Once that permit meets their requirements, it has to go before the DEP, the U.S. Coast Guard, and the Army Corps of Engineers. There's a whole list of things, how deep the water is, how much space there is above the top of whatever goes down. What goes down is highly regulated. It's got to be concrete or steel, something like that, that's not going to blow away or break up. But what I did is I talked to them and saw what they needed. So I went ahead and looked, with my knowledge of being an offshore captain, I looked for areas that I felt would benefit us. Carabel has been proactive. Carabel has already formed an Artificial Reef Association, and they've been putting stuff out in front of Dog Island now for several years. They're working with the Organization of Artificial Reefs out of Tallahassee. A lot of those people come down, they keep their boats in Carabel, so Carabel's been kind of a little pet project for this OR group. We're kind of the redheaded stepchildren over here in Apalachicola because we're a little too far away for them to come to. So I've taken it upon myself to start the process. I identified a few locations. I met with FWC. They preliminary said that's okay. I went to Buddy Ward Seafood about a year ago and sat down with a couple of their captains on some of their machines and picked out some areas that did not impact the shrimping fleet. That hasn't been done in the past, and they could definitely, they're full of complaints of areas they can't go anymore because there was stuff dumped off of Mexico Beach, off of Dog Island. Well, I went and I beat that horse before it ran out of the stall. And I got some spots located that the Ward Seafood shrimping guy said this will work for us. So I took those back to FWC. They kind of coordinated and said, yeah, okay, that's fine. They sent a boat down here with a side scan sonar to check out one of these areas to determine there was nothing already there, that there was no natural bottom. It passed. They sent a group of divers down, which I took out on my boat this past November, and let them hit 12 different spots within this area, which they deemed are okay. The spot we've kind of picked out is 8.5 miles, basically straight south of the cut. Bob Sykes Cuts. Easy to get to for anybody coming off of St. George Island or out of Apalachicola. It's in 40 feet of water, so it's easy for divers, free divers, for fishermen. You're not pulling up from 200 feet deep or anything like that. Being 8.5 miles out, it's a 1 mile by 1 mile square. That's roughly 640 acres. So there's plenty of room to put all kinds of stuff. There's, these concrete reef modules are the big popular thing that they make now. They've determined that those things tend to last. They attract a lot of fish, so that's what we'd probably be going for to start with. What I need from you guys is to agree that you will be the entity that will sign for the permit. It has to be a municipality or a government body to basically assume responsibility for this area. There's not really much liability that goes with it because it's approved contractors that put this stuff down. It's basically a company out of Pensacola called Walker Marine is the main one that does this area. And they have a whole list of guidelines that they have to follow. FWC goes with them to make sure that they do the right job, they put it where it's going to be, and it meets all the requirements. As long as that's done, we've got no issues. It's just like any kind of public works contract where if you guys hire a construction company to do the roads, they have their liability insurance that covers them. If they mess up, that's who has to pay for it. So you guys, we're not liable for anything, but we are the responsible parties. You guys are. And in this area, it's either you or it's the city of Apalachicola. They will not let some entity, the Boy Scouts of America, Artificial Reef, can't apply for these kind of permits because little mom and pop type groups have popped up in the past, applied, gotten permits, and then they disband 5 years later and they're gone. So FWC requires it to be a government body that signs for this permit. The permit application is $700. That's it. That covers this entire 1 mile by 1 mile area. Now, this is just to get this area approved. From that point on, once we get this done, this permit, then we'd have to apply for smaller little areas when we're going to put the reefs actually down. Just by naming this area, it'll get it on the charts for the Coast Guard and things like that. It kind of gets the ball rolling. There are tons of grants that we can apply for. The county commission does not have to be buying these reefs. There's all kinds of stuff. In fact, FWC has a $50,000 grant that basically we're guaranteed just by getting our permit approved. So that gets us started. And then there's the Coastal Conservation Association. There's 25 different groups that we can apply for. I'll end up forming some kind of a little non-for-profit artificial reef association. We'll call it the Franklin County Reef Association or the Apalachicola. I mean, we'll figure that out. But it'll be me, for starters, that will figure out what we're going to do, get the grant, and I will have the application or the permit filled out, and I will just be bringing it to you guys to be signed, and we'll start putting these reefs out there. By doing that, that'll let the charter captains can go out there and start catching snapper without having to have that $20,000 permit. In the future, I'm going to try to get another area that's out deeper because of where this particular one is going. It's only 40 feet deep. That limits us to what we can put in. There needs to be a 30-foot clearance between the top of these rocks and the surface, so bigger boats aren't going to have a chance of hitting it. That comes back to the liability. We don't want to put anything down that anybody can run into. But in the future, we're going to need something out deeper. And I will figure that out working with Ward Seafood again on that. But there are grants to get ships. We can get barges. We can get all kinds of stuff. There are people that are putting these things together that are looking for places to put them. Right now, Franklin County, we are about at the bottom of the list for artificial reefs off of our waters. All the other coastal counties in the state of Florida have tons of this stuff. We are way behind the times, and I'm trying to at least get us started so we're not going to be able to catch up, but at least we're not getting left further behind. So that's where we're at. I was given the opportunity to just kind of decide what we wanted to call it. The Apalachicola Reef is already in existence, the Franklin County Reef, the St. George Island Reef, the Alligator Point Reef, the Carabel Reef. All the major areas have already been named. So since Ward Seafood was so gracious to let me sit down with their guys and kind of figure out where we could put this where it didn't hurt them. And also just recently, I don't know if you guys attended the oyster cook-off, but we couldn't have done it without Ward Seafood. They let us use their walk-in cooler right there to keep all the oysters, all the food, the drinks, everything. We were using their pallet jacks. We used every one of those oysters that was shucked on their big shucking table. So I'd like to bring it to you guys that I want to name this area the Buddy Ward Memorial Reef, just because Ward Seafood's been so prominent in this community in Apalachicola, and they're really one of the only going concerns. I mean, how many tourists come here and get their pictures taken in front of Miss Martha? So I want to make that recommendation to you guys. I already ran that by the state of Florida. They're fine. We can call it whatever we want to call it. The little individual reefs that are going to go in there will have individual names. By forming this not-for-profit organization, people can do memorial reefs. If John Doe passes away, in lieu of flowers, donate for the John Doe Memorial Reef, and his wife can put his ashes in the concrete if she wants, or we go put a little plaque on there. Those little reef balls are $2,000 a piece delivered and deployed. So that's how that works. For $2,000, you can have a 10 by 10 reef ball out there with your name on it. So there's going to be different groups that are waiting for this. I mean, there can be the Dixie Theater Reef if they want to. Anybody that wants to donate can name a little fishing spot after themselves and put it out there. So what I need from you guys basically is in the minutes. It needs to reflect that I have presented this to you and that you guys are willing to be the entity that will sign for the permit when I bring it to you. It'll probably be another month or two down the road. For FWC just needs this in writing that Franklin County Commission will be the entity signing off on this reef project. And in the future, that we will have additional reefs, probably in deeper water. But I just kind of want to get that on the minutes also, so I don't have to come back and do this again. We'll be able to just know that you guys are willing to move forward. I think,
Go ahead, Ms. Lofton.
Oh, you did say that the fee was gonna be $700. Who will be responsible for that?
well, either the county can write a check for it, or I can get a group of people together. We can all throw in $20. I mean,
Okay.
the $700 is not going to be
I
an
know-
issue.
I know, I just wanted to be on the book. And one more question. You said, now this gonna be for everybody? I mean, you know, this just gonna be for commercial?
No, no,
This for
sir.
everybody, right?
This is everybody. When I say it's 8.5 miles out, when you drive out there through the cut, you can see the cut. You can see the houses on the plantation. You can see Little St. George Island. It's close, but it's out in the Gulf of Mexico. So there's whole other fish that are out there. There's red snapper, there's grouper, there's king mackerel. There's fish out there that aren't in the bay. But by being close, it lets everybody that's got a 19 or 20-foot boat, you know, whatever you feel comfortable with, on a good flat day, you could go out there in a John boat. Just be ready to come on back in if you need to. But being 8 miles out, you know, that's relatively close. So it's gonna open up a lot of fishing for a lot of people. And the more stuff we put in there, the better it's gonna be. Because right now, like I said, all we've got is the Franklin Reef and the little old El Buoy, which is basically gone because it was done almost 50 years ago. So, well, over 50. The Franklin Reef is 14 miles from the cut. You got to go out and then over. The Franklin Reef is located out in front of the state park of St. George Island. It's 14 miles. The one I'm talking about is 6 miles closer to the cut. So it's an easy little run.
Yeah, anytime they put a reef out, Mr. Noah, that's put it on the navigation chart.
Yeah.
And everybody gets it. On that deep water one you talking about putting, you gonna put it between the S Tower and the 40 break or down around the 200 line or where?
It'll really depend on the state of Florida. They kind of look at what's already out there and they look to try to fill in gaps. Right now, there's a big gap kind of between the C Tower and like the Empire Mica.
Right.
There's a big hole out there. But then it comes back to going toward seafood and saying, all right, where do you guys shrimp? Because the shrimpers have had a big problem of running these things over and ripping up their nets. So it's key to bring the shrimpers in. A lot of these other communities haven't done that. They haven't gone to the shrimpers first, and that's where I kind of just did, because it's easy. We do have just Ward Seafood that's offshore here. And I talked to those guys, and they would put the word out and let the Panama City folks, they all talk, and let those guys know that this is where it's going to be. As soon as something is going in, it gets put on the chart. These guys all have electronic charts to get updated. They'll know it's there.
Yeah, I shrimp for 25 years.
You're aware of it.
Let me make a comment here. If the board remember, they came to us a year and a half ago and wanted to look at these artificial reefs, and my first question was, well, don't put it where we shrimp, because that's gonna impact everybody, and the whole community's gonna get in an uproar. So that's kinda what got Grayson to come down to our place, and he didn't deal with me, he dealt with the guys that work on the boats. And looking at areas in the Gulf that they could actually maybe do something like this and not impact the shrimping industry. Now, you have to understand that as people go out there and fish, they come back in, and it provides economic impact. Whether they have these fish cooked at a local restaurant, whether they stay at a motel, whether they buy their fuel, whether they buy their tackle. So it's a local economic impact that goes with this. As he stated, he came down and talked with several of our captains. They went on the charts and the plots, and this is a place that they picked out. I really don't have a problem with it as long as it don't impact other industries. And obviously, we've done that, and he's been to FWC, he's been to me a couple different times discussing what he found, and some of the captains on the boats told me. And so I really don't have a problem with it. And, a lot of BP money's been spent building these artificial reefs off of Mexico Beach, Panama City, Walton County, Okaloosa County, Escambia County, all across the state of Florida. And as he stated, we haven't done anything. So I would like to see this project move forward. As far as the $700, I've talked to him, I'll throw in $100, he'll throw in so that's not for the board to fund. I think we can handle that outside the board.
Well, you can get it from,
I'll make a motion, let's write the letter to, Thornton to get what he needs.
All I'm gonna need is just a copy of the minutes that show that I was here, and that you guys, I guess, make a motion that you wanna move forward with this project, and you agree to sign the permit when it's brought to you, and future permits.
Right.
Just as long as that's kind of in writing, that goes in with the application, that's
I'll
gonna
go
go on
with you.
forward.
Yeah, because once you break outside of 20 miles to the west, it's all rock bottom.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, Mr. Shepherd, have you contacted the OR organization?
I have, and in fact, OR reached out to me first. They caught wind of what I was
Are
doing.
they supportive of this?
Oh,
project?
absolutely. They are
Well,
100%
because
supportive.
they've got a large following behind them, and they fit well with the state of Florida and all, so there may be something out there that they might can help you with.
I've been to their meetings. I've got a couple of their guys on speed dial on my phone. They are thrilled that we're doing this.
Yeah.
Basically, it's about time. I mean, they've been doing a lot of stuff over in Carabel and off Alligator Point, but nobody over here is taking the initiative, and that's, here I
And
am.
it's mainly about the shrimping we do over here, but we've worked that out. Attorney, do you have anything
I just
to
want to look
say?
at the permit before we sign off on anything, but I think what he's asking for is concept approval moving forward, but it would have to be made subject to the attorney's review of the permit and what level of responsibility they're expecting from the people of Franklin County.
You have a comment?
yeah, before we, well, since this gonna be attracting people, and they don't need I don't think it's right for you to be paying your money out your pocket. We go through the TDC,
Well, $700, you can pay for it out of
yeah. Well, out of some-
yeah, you can pay for it out of the county. But the motion needs to reflect that the county's paying the $700 fee.
Yeah, I
Who
mean,
act-
it ain't right for you to pay out of your pocket.
You have a comment, Mr. Commissioner Jones? Okay, who made the motion? William, you wanna revise your motion to include that the county's gonna handle the $700 permit fee?
Yeah.
Do you amend your second, Commissioner Lockwood?
I do.
Any other comments from the board? We do have a motion and a second on the floor. There being no further comments, all in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. Anything else, Mr. Shepherd?
I'll be on the agenda in another month or two to bring you a permit sign.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for coming in today. The board recessed 5 minutes.